in the quiet shadows of Asia's towering cities, behind elevator doors that open when no one calls, between the thin walls of modern apartments, there are stories no architect dares to write into the blueprints. Stories of the unseen, of those who were forgotten or never truly alive to begin with. Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where silence speaks, where rituals still echo in concrete walls, where the dead wait, not in graveyards, but beside you in the hallway. Tonight, we descend floor by floor into one such story. A girl who knocks but never speaks. A neighbor with no name on the lease. And a pattern that returns every night at exactly 3:13 a.m. This is the girl on the 12th floor. The neighbor who was never alive. Turn off the lights. Put your back to the wall. And whatever you do, don't open the door. Not yet.
The key looked ordinary. A plain silver shaft with a dull blue plastic top, the kind you'd expect from any newly built apartment complex. It was attached to a flimsy keychain from the property office that read, "Room 1201, welcome home." The ink was already smudging. Yen held it in her hand, standing at the end of a long, sterile hallway on the 12th floor. Her suitcase wheels had squeaked all the way from the elevator, the only sound in the building so far. Not a single neighbor had passed her. No footfalls, no distant murmurs, no sound of TV, children, or doors slamming, just silence, thick and clean. The corridor lighting was bright, but felt cold, too white, too empty. Each overhead light buzzed faintly, like an old insect trap waiting to be used. She found her door, 1201, brushed her fingers across the numbers as if to confirm they were real. And then she tried the key. It didn't fit. She turned it again, tilted it, tried to push it in slower. Nothing. The key simply refused to slide into the lock. It pushed back, resisting, like it belonged to something else entirely. Her brows furrowed. "Seriously?" she whispered, glancing down the hallway. There was still no one else, no one to ask, no concierge on this floor, not even a directory. She reached for her phone to call the leasing office, then paused. There it was again, a sound, a soft click from behind her. She turned. The door to room 1203 had just unlocked. It was subtle, barely audible, but she was sure she'd heard it. That soft mechanical sigh a door makes when a lock disengages. But no one stood there. The door itself was shut, perfectly closed, perfectly still. She stepped closer, unsure if she'd imagined it. The door to 1203 was identical to hers, sleek matte black with a silver handle. No peephole, no welcome mat, no sign of life. But the moment she stood in front of it, she felt it, cold. The temperature dropped, not suddenly like in horror movies, but subtly, like stepping into the shade of a large tree on a too warm day, just enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. She quickly backed away, returning to her own door. She tried the key again. This time it slid in easily, too easily. The lock clicked open without resistance. She blinked. Had she been holding it wrong the first time? Yen shook her head and wheeled her suitcase inside, closing the door behind her with a hollow thud. The apartment was spotless. Modern gray tones, polished wood floors, grass kitchen counters still wrapped in factory film. It smelled of new paint and disinfectant. Still, something about it felt unoccupied but not untouched, like someone had been here but not for long. She pulled her suitcase to the wall and dropped onto the faux leather couch that had come with the place, exhausted. Moving in alone was always tiring, but this move had felt heavier. Not just because she had left her old apartment after the breakup, or because this one was located far from the city center. It was something else, something harder to name. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the leasing agent spoke too quickly during the tour, never stepping fully into the 12th floor. Maybe it was the fact that this entire complex, so new, so modern, had barely any tenants yet. But mostly, it was that door. She hadn't even seen it open, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling it had acknowledged her. That night, she set her phone on the charging stand beside the bed and opened the windows for air. The city below hummed faintly, distant cars, horns, life. But here, 12 stories up, it all felt muffled, far away, as if the building floated, disconnected. She drifted into sleep sometime past midnight, then woke, suddenly, to a sound. She didn't move, just listened. Click. That unmistakable sound again, the soft, mechanical sigh of a lock disengaging. It came from the hallway. Yen sat up slowly. She checked her phone. 3:13 a.m. She held her breath, waited. Nothing else. No footsteps. No knock. No voices. Just that single, quiet sound. In the morning, she convinced herself it was a dream, or maybe someone on another floor. The walls were thin. She'd figure out the quirks. She opened her front door to check the hallway. It was empty. But something caught her eye. A mirror. She hadn't noticed it the day before. Mounted across from room 1203. Large, rectangular, spanning nearly from floor to ceiling. It was odd. Why would a hallway mirror face directly across a single door? She stepped toward it, and her own reflection met her. Tired, pale, a little disheveled from the night's poor sleep. But then, just for a split second, she thought she saw a second reflection. A girl, standing next to her, behind her. Not in the hallway, but in the mirror. When she turned, there was no one, and 1203's door was still tightly shut. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply. New apartment jitters, she told herself. She turned, walked back to 1201, and closed the door. But as she did, she noticed something carved faintly inside the doorframe, almost like it had been scratched in haste. A date, March 13th, 3:13 a.m., and just below it, barely visible unless the light hit it just right, "Don't let her in." It started the following night. Yen had unpacked half her boxes. Clothes filled the tiny wardrobe. Spices were aligned alphabetically in the cupboard like always, and she'd even lit one of those cheap lavender candles for comfort. By evening, her apartment looked almost lived in. Almost. But that feeling hadn't left. The sense of being watched. Not in a paranoid, dramatic way, just observed. Like her movements were being recorded. Like someone or something else was learning her patterns. She told herself it was the adjustment. She'd lived in smaller, older buildings before, places with creaking wood floors and rusted sinks. This was sleek, modern, silent. Too silent. She made dinner, stir-fried noodles, ate in front of the TV. And just after 11 p.m., her power flickered. The lights didn't go out completely, just a brief dim, a hiccup in the flow, like a breath being held and then exhaled. The television screen went black for half a second, then blinked back on. The sound resumed mid-sentence. Her electric kettle peaked. She stared at the wall, waited, then shook her head. Power surge, probably. Happens.
but something inside her whispered that it wouldn't be the last time. She went to bed just past midnight, set her phone alarm for 8 o'clock, turned off the lights. This time, she left the bedroom door slightly ajar, the way she always did in unfamiliar places, just enough to feel less boxed in. Sleep took longer to come. But when it did, it came in strange, jittery waves, like her mind kept waking up without fully surfacing. She kept hearing something faint, like tapping, like fingers. Click. Eyes open. Darkness. Her phone screen lit up as she reached for it. 3:13 a.m. Her chest tightened. The same time, again. She rose slowly and stepped out of bed. The apartment was colder than before. The lavender candle had burned down to a waxy pool. She padded barefoot to the front door, looked through the peephole. No one. But she could see the mirror. That hallway mirror. It was directly across from her door, slightly off to the left, facing the blank door of room 1203. And in it, there was someone standing there. A girl. Long black hair. Head tilted just slightly to the side. Not moving. Just standing outside 1203, barefoot, wearing what looked like a pale house dress. Her face partially obscured by her hair, but Yen could feel her gaze reflected directly into the mirror. She blinked, then pulled away from the peephole. Her heart pounded, a rhythmic, pulsing thud. She opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. The mirror was there, cold, spotless, quiet. But there was no girl, no footsteps, no sound of retreat, nothing but the faint mechanical hum of the building's ceiling lights. She closed the door, locked it, slid the second bolt into place, then returned to bed, not bothering to sleep. The next day, she visited the front desk. A woman in her mid-30s sat behind the reception counter, scrolling her phone. She looked up with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes?" "Hi," Yen said. "I just moved into 1201. "Ah, you're the new tenant on 12. Welcome." "Thanks. Is there anyone in 1203? The woman blinked. 1203? "Yeah. My neighbor, across the hall." The woman glanced at her screen, tapped a few keys. "There's no unit 1203. Yen frowned. I mean, there's a door right next to mine." The woman squinted. "Are you sure it's not 1205? "No, 1205 is the next one over." Now the woman looked mildly annoyed. "I'm telling you, miss, we don't have a 1203 in this building. The 12th floor has 1201, 1205, 1207, and 1209. No even-numbered rooms between them." "But there's a door," Yen whispered, "right across from mine. Black, silver handle, same as mine. I've seen it." "Probably access storage. Staff only," the woman said with a shrug. "Those aren't listed on our resident registry." Yen didn't argue, but something felt wrong. If it was staff access, why did it have a door number? Why had she seen someone standing there? Why had she heard that lock click at exactly 3:13 a.m. twice now? That night, she couldn't help herself. She waited. Not in bed, but by the door, wrapped in a thin blanket, lights off, her phone in hand. She waited until the clock on her screen read 3:12 a.m. And then, click. The sound was soft but sharp, echoing faintly through the wood. 3:13 a.m. Yen pressed her eye to the peephole and saw nothing. No one at the door. No movement. But she could see the mirror again. And there, like before, stood the girl. Hair covering most of her face, barefoot, facing the mirror, not the hallway, like she was waiting. And then, the girl in the reflection slowly lifted her hand and tapped once on the glass. Tap. But it wasn't just in the mirror. Yen heard it loud and clear right on her own door. Tap. She jerked back, her breath caught. Then silence. When she dared to look again, the mirror showed only emptiness. She didn't sleep after that. She sat with her back to the wall until sunrise. The following evening, she covered the peephole with masking tape, then covered the hallway side of her door with a hanging cloth, an old scarf taped across the frame like a curtain. But when she woke the next morning, she found it folded, neatly, on the floor. Not fallen, not crumpled, folded, as if someone had gently taken it down. And behind it, on the wall next to her door, was a smudge, a dark, hand-shaped smudge, long fingers, pressed directly where a knock would be. Yen didn't tell anyone. She didn't want to sound crazy. But from that night on, she avoided the mirror, never looked at it directly. Still, she could feel it. Every night at 3:13 a.m., she'd feel that strange stillness, that drop in temperature, that hollow silence, and always, always, that sense that the girl was still standing there. Not in the hallway, but in the mirror, waiting. For the next 2 days, Yen tried to pretend everything was normal. She went to work, smiled at coworkers, answered emails, ate lunch at her desk. She even laughed once at something she didn't really hear. But when evening came and she returned to her 12th floor corridor, the weight returned immediately. That hush, that hollow air that smelled faintly of dust and cold paint. Still, she forced herself to breathe. "It's just a building," she whispered. "A building can't hurt you." She turned her key into the lock and froze. There was someone standing a few feet away in front of room 1203. A girl. Slender, quiet, her long hair pinned neatly behind one ear this time. She wore a loose white blouse and a navy skirt, like a university student. Her hands were clasped in front of her, polite, almost shy. When she noticed Yen staring, she smiled faintly. "Ah, sorry," the girl said softly. "Did I scare you?" Yen blinked. "No, I just didn't expect anyone here. I haven't seen neighbors." The girl nodded. "Most people keep to themselves here. The walls are thin." Her voice had an odd rhythm, soft, deliberate, each word pronounced as if it had been learned carefully. It wasn't eerie, just offbeat, like she spoke from habit rather than instinct. "I'm Nari, from 1203. Yen's chest tightened. 1203? The girl tilted her head, smiling again. "Yes. But the office said that room doesn't exist." For a second, Nari just looked at her, expression unreadable. Then she laughed quietly. "Oh, they always say that. It's easier for them that way."
Her smile stayed, but her eyes didn't match. It's easier for them that way. Yen didn't know how to respond. Well, Nari said after a pause, welcome to the 12th floor. It gets lonely up here. Most of the others moved out. She gave a small wave and slipped back toward her door. Yen opened her mouth to ask something, to say, "Wait, how long have you lived here?" But Nari was already gone. Her door closed with a whisper. No sound of a lock turning. Later that night, Yen found herself thinking about the girl. The way she smiled too long before speaking. The way her shoes didn't make a sound on the tile. Still, it felt comfortable. For the first time since moving in, she wasn't entirely alone. She made tea and watched the steam curl through the apartment's still air. When the clock ticked past midnight, she glanced toward the front door and whispered to herself, "See? You're fine. You're safe." And yet, when she finally went to bed, she dreamed of that hallway again, of mirrors and closed doors, and someone's reflection still standing there long after the body had gone. The next morning, Yen decided to be brave. She bought a small orchid from the flower stall near the train station, a bright purple bloom with roots wrapped in soft moss. Something living, something gentle. She wanted to give it to Nari, to thank her for being kind. When she returned home, sunlight streamed through the stairwell windows, turning the white walls golden. For a moment, the building felt peaceful. She climbed to the 12th floor and froze. The orchid was already there, sitting in front of 1203. Same color, same pot, tied with a red ribbon identical to the one she just bought. Her fingers loosened around the plastic bag. The one she carried slid down her wrist, and the small flower inside swayed. She knelt, staring at the one before her. The soil looked dry, untouched for weeks. Yet the petals were perfect, not a single wilt. She swallowed. "Nari?" she called softly. No answer. She tapped on the door once. Nothing. She tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. Only the sound of her own pulse. When she turned away, she thought she heard a faint whisper behind the door, something like a sigh or a hum. But when she leaned closer, there was only silence. That night, she placed her own orchid on the kitchen counter next to the kettle. But when she woke the next morning, it wasn't there. It stood by the window, facing outside. The blinds had been drawn when she went to bed. Now they were open. Yen tried to convince herself she'd forgotten, moved it without realizing. People sleepwalk sometimes, don't they? It happens. But something inside her knew she hadn't, because when she lifted the pot, she saw it, a faint ring of water beneath it, and in the center of that ring, a single fingerprint, smudged, too long, too thin. Later that evening, there was a knock at her door. 3 gentle taps. She hesitated, staring at the handle. "Who is it?" A pause, then a familiar voice, soft through the door. "It's Nari. Sorry if it's late." Relief washed over her, mixed with unease. She opened the door halfway. The girl stood there again, smiling that small, practiced smile. "I just wanted to check if you were settling in." Yeah, I'm okay, thanks." Nari glanced past her into the apartment. "Your lights flickered last night. This building sometimes remembers too much." I frowned. "What do you mean?" The girl's expression didn't change. "The walls, they echo." She held out her hand suddenly. "You dropped this," she said. In her palm was Yen's key, the spare one she kept on the kitchen hook. "How did you—" But Nari was already stepping backward, her voice quiet. "Be careful after midnight. The lights might go out again." And before Yen could speak, the girl was gone. The hallway was empty once more. The door to 1203 shut softly behind her. That night, Yen left her lights on. She didn't want dreams, didn't want silence. But at 3:13 a.m., even with the lights burning bright, the shadows moved. The orchid by the window trembled, though no wind passed. And in the faint reflection of the glass, Yen saw it again. Nari, standing in the hallway, barefoot, head slightly tilted, a soft smile frozen on her lips, waiting.
The orchid didn't die. Days passed, then a week. The petals remained upright, untouched by decay. No browning edges, no drooping stem. It stood on her windowsill like a perfect photograph, frozen in time. Yen watered it once, just once, but it never seemed to need more. And then it moved. Not dramatically, not like in movies, not levitating or crawling or floating across the room. No, it moved like something forgotten, something subtle. It shifted positions. First, it was by the window, then on her bathroom sink. She remembered placing it on the sill, always the same spot, but the next morning it was somewhere else. At first, she thought she'd moved it and forgot, maybe during a phone call, maybe while cleaning. But the third time, she knew, because she'd placed it inside a cabinet, shut the door, and woke to find it back by the bed, angled slightly toward her pillow. The building was quiet again, quieter than before. She didn't see Nari, not for days. No knocks, no hallway presence, not even a glimpse in the mirror. Yen wanted to believe it was over, that maybe Nari was just a strange neighbor with strange timing. Maybe she'd left, moved out, quietly, like the others. But the orchid remained. And every night at 3:13 a.m., Yen still woke up, not to sound, but to awareness, a pulse in the stillness, a breath that wasn't hers. She started leaving the lights on again. Not all of them, just one or two, the kitchen, the bathroom. But on the 6th night, the lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on. She sat up in bed, wrapped in her blanket like armor. The apartment was cold, not freezing, not sharp, but empty, as if warmth itself had retreated. Her phone read 3:13 a.m. Of course it did. She rose slowly, heart thudding. The windows glowed faintly with the light of the city, a soft amber hue. The orchid on the sill looked black in the shadows. She walked to the bathroom to fetch her flashlight, opened the door, and froze. The orchid was there, in the sink. Soil scattered, roots dry, but the petals were still perfect, fresh, as if plucked moments ago. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. The water faucet turned on by itself. She gasped and stepped back. The water gushed out, icy and loud in the silence. Then, click, it stopped. Yen stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the sink. And then, the orchid leaned, just a little, as if bowing. She didn't sleep again that night. She placed the orchid outside, right in front of room 1203, set it down, without knocking, without looking into the mirror, just placed it on the floor and returned to her apartment. But in the morning, it was back, on her kitchen counter, and beside it, a note, folded neatly, plain white paper, no handwriting on the outside. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside, a single sentence, "You forgot to water it." No name, no punctuation. She dropped the note, backed away. Her legs hit the chair behind her, and she sat down hard, breath catching in her throat. That day, she worked from home. She didn't leave the apartment, not even to check the hallway. But at one point, when she passed the peephole, she paused, and something compelled her to look. She peeked through. The hallway was dimmer than usual, and the orchid was there again, in front of 1203, but this time there were two. Identical pots, identical petals, twins. She blinked, and then one of them turned. Not visibly, not like movement, but the orchid faced her. Through the peephole, through the hallway, the petals leaned toward her door, toward her. That night she locked every window, closed every curtain, but still at 3:13 a.m. she woke to silence, to stillness, to the feeling that something small and living was watching her. She turned on the light again, and there it was, on her nightstand, the orchid, beside her glass of water, and stuck into the soil, a tiny hairpin, not hers, a small silver hairpin with a faded rose at the end. She knew deep down it belonged to Nari. In the days that followed, she found more. Little things, a strand of long black hair on her pillow, a footprint, barefoot, on her bathroom mat, still damp, the scent of white flowers in her wardrobe, the mirror in the hallway fogged with a message that vanished before she could read it. She didn't sleep well, she didn't dream, but she began to speak, not to herself, but to the orchid. At first, just muttering, "Where did you come from?" or "Leave me alone." But then, her tone changed. She began whispering apologies. "I'm sorry. I don't know what you want. Please stop." The orchid never replied, but it stayed, always bright, always facing her, until one night when it didn't appear at 3:13. That night the apartment was darker than usual. Still, she waited, but nothing came. No knock, no flicker, no shift in the air. And for the first time, she felt lonely, as if something had been taken away. In the morning, she found the orchid gone, completely. No pot, no soil, no trail of water, just emptiness. And she cried. She didn't know why. That afternoon, she stepped out, walked to the door of 1203. No orchid, no sound, but the mirror. In it, she saw herself, and standing behind her, the faint outline of a girl, smiling, holding an orchid, just before the reflection turned black. The building's vents ran along the top edge of every room,
Sleek slits in the drywall, small and silent, like a mouth that had forgotten how to speak. Yen had never paid them any mind, until one night she heard them breathe. It began as a soft hum, no louder than the sound of distant traffic, a steady hiss of air, normal at first, mechanical, forgettable. But then the rhythm shifted. The sound grew deeper, human, like a breath held too long, and then exhaled slowly, intentionally, into her bedroom. She sat up in bed, listening. The noise seemed to come from the vent directly above her closet door, a narrow rectangular opening that hadn't made a sound in weeks. The hiss turned to a whisper, too soft to make out words, but sharp enough to have meaning. She climbed out of bed, heart stuttering in her chest, and stood beneath the vent. It fell silent. She waited, then whispered, "Hello?" And the whisper replied, a perfect echo of her own voice. "Hello." She froze. That wasn't an echo. There was a delay, a voice, imitating hers, from the other side of the vent. She stepped back, reached for her phone. The time? 3:13 a.m. Of course it was. She grabbed a chair and climbed up carefully, pressing her ear close to the vent's mouth. It was dark inside, deeper than it should have been. She heard breathing, faint, close. Then, a voice. Not hers this time. A girl's voice, familiar, gentle. "Yen?" Yen stumbled backward off the chair, nearly knocking over the lamp. She didn't scream. She couldn't. She just stood there, staring at the vent like it might blink. That morning, she called building maintenance. "I think the vents are connected between the rooms," she said, trying to sound casual. "I'm hearing sounds, like someone next door." The man on the phone paused. "You're in 1201, right?" "Yes." "There's no one next to you. That unit is sealed." 1203? "No. That room's been locked since construction, never leased." Yen's grip tightened around the phone. "But there's a door, a number. I've seen someone there." Another pause, longer. Then the man's voice returned, quieter. "That floor has issues. If you're hearing things, it's probably just old ductwork. Echoes. Echoes." She hung up, and that night she recorded the sound. She set her phone on her pillow, voice recorder app running, left it on while she slept, or rather, tried to sleep. She lay still, eyes closed, breath shallow. The hiss came again, from the vent. Then, whispers. Not words, not yet, just syllables, as if someone was learning how to speak through the walls. She pulled the blanket tighter. Eventually, exhaustion won. She drifted off. In the morning, she played back the recording. It began normal, soft static, the occasional rustle of sheets. Then, the hiss, followed by a faint voice. "Yen." She paused the playback, rewound, listened again. "Yen." And then a second voice, clearer, sharper. "You forgot me." Yen dropped her phone. It clattered to the floor. The voice had been right behind her ear, right next to the mic. Too close to be from the vent, too close to be anything human. Later that evening, she investigated the vent. She dragged a chair beneath it again, shined a flashlight into the dark opening. Metal ducts ran along the inside, dusty but undisturbed. No signs of insects, no mold, nothing unnatural. until she looked closer. There was something stuck between the slats. She reached in with her fingers, careful not to slice her skin. It was paper, folded, crumpled. She pulled it free. It was damp. She unfolded it slowly. A child's drawing. Crayons, smudged lines. Two girls, standing beside each other in front of a black door labeled 1203. One girl had long black hair. The other girl had no face. Yen dropped the drawing. It landed on her bare feet. She didn't pick it up. That night, the vent stayed silent, but the hallway didn't. At 3:13 a.m., she heard movement outside. Footsteps, barefoot, soft against tile. Then, knuckles, tapping once against her door. And then, a breath, exhaled slowly, right into her keyhole. She stood frozen in the dark, back pressed to the wall, eyes wide open. The silence afterward felt heavy, like the air itself was holding her down. She didn't sleep. She didn't move until dawn. The next morning, she opened the front door. Nothing outside, except the drawing, pinned to her doormat with a single silver hairpin, the same one Nari had left in the orchid. Only this time, the faceless girl in the picture had been drawn in again, and it was her, Yen. She burned the drawing in the sink, but the smell lingered, not of smoke, of flowers, the same ones that grew outside 1203, the ones no one watered, the ones no one watered, the ones that never died. That evening she lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the vent. And the vent whispered back, not with words, but with breathing, with crying. Soft, slow sobs from the girl in 1203, from the neighbor who was never supposed to exist.
The mail room was always colder than the rest of the building. It sat tucked away behind the lobby, painted in soft off-white, lit with dim yellow fluorescence that flickered if you looked at them too long. The rows of boxes stretched wall to wall, small silver doors, identical in shape and lock, labeled with neat black numbers. Yen came down to check her mailbox on a Wednesday. She hadn't received anything in a while, which wasn't unusual, but something tugged at her, a strange feeling she couldn't name, the kind that makes you suddenly need to confirm that you still exist in the records of the world. She found her box, 1201. She bent the key into the lock. It opened with a metallic squeak. Inside, nothing, not even dust. She closed it and looked to the left. 1203, or rather, where 1203 should be. It wasn't there. There was 1201, then a blank space, just smooth steel where a box should have been, and then 1205. She frowned. She reached out and tapped the blank metal panel. It didn't echo. It felt dense, heavy, like it wasn't part of the original construction. She looked up at the directory mounted above the mailboxes, a laminated chart showing which apartments corresponded to which box. Her finger traced down the list. There it was again. 1201, blank. 1205. No 1203. No listing. Like the number itself had been redacted from reality.
Back in her apartment, Yen sat at the kitchen table, turning the building's welcome packet over in her hands. She flipped to the map of the floors. 12th floor, units labeled clearly. There it was again, 1201, 1205, 1207, 1209. No 1203. She got up and walked into the hallway, barefoot. Past her door, past the orchid that had returned again without her touching it, she stopped in front of the black door. It still had the number, 1203, white digits, metal, affixed just slightly crooked. She ran her fingers over them. Solid, real. So why didn't it exist in any documents? Why was the mailbox missing? Why did the building want to erase this room? Or worse, why did the room erase itself? That night she received her first piece of mail in weeks. It wasn't in her box. It was on her kitchen counter. No stamp, no envelope. Just a folded slip of paper, aged and yellow at the corners, as if it had traveled a long way. She unfolded it slowly. One word. Mine. Her breath hitched. She dropped the note and stepped back. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closer, her own heartbeat suddenly too loud. She backed into the bedroom and locked the door. The next day, she called the leasing office. The same woman answered, the one with the flat smile. "I'd like to report an issue," Yen said calmly. "What kind of issue?" "A break-in," she lied. "I'm getting mail that wasn't sent. Someone's entering my apartment." She was quiet. "We've had no other complaints. I want to see the building's tenant list. That's private. I need to confirm who lives in 1203. Another pause. Then, "There is no 1203, miss." Yen's hands trembled. "You keep saying that, but there is. I've seen her. I've spoken to her." "I think you're mistaken." The voice was clipped now, professional but empty, like reading from a script. Yen hung up. She sat in silence for a long time, then stood. She needed proof. She returned to the hallway with her phone, opened the camera app. The mirror across from 1203 reflected her dim form, slightly distorted by the light. She turned the phone toward the black door. The screen flickered. For a moment, it showed something wrong. The door was open. A girl was standing there, hair long and wet, trailing down her back like vines. Her eyes were hollow, her skin too pale. But when Yen looked up with her own eyes, the hallway was empty. The door was closed. She looked back at the screen. The door was still open. The girl was still there, and she was walking toward the phone. She dropped it. The screen shattered against the tile. The mirror across the hallway pulsed, like something behind it had moved. That night, the mail came again, folded neatly on her pillow. A photograph this time. Old, faded. Two girls sitting on a rooftop ledge. One was Yen, the other was Nari. Both smiling, arms around each other. Yen had never seen this photo before. She didn't own that outfit. She had never sat on that ledge. But the smile was hers. The date scribbled on the back read, March 12th, move-in day, 3:13 a.m. She burned the photo in the sink, but the ashes reformed in the soap wash. She threw them away. They returned beneath her pillow. She flushed them, but they reappeared inside her mailbox the next morning, which now had the number 1203 scribbled onto the metal in red ink. Yen stood in front of the box, hand trembling, key clutched in her fist. It didn't fit. Not hers. But another key was taped to the top of the box, unlabeled. She took it. It was warm. Too warm. That night she left it on the counter. When she woke at 3:13 a.m., the door to her apartment was wide open, and the key was gone. It rained the next morning. Not the soft kind of rain that washed the city in peace, but the heavy kind. The kind that filled gutters, blurred windows, and made the air feel heavy with grief. Yen stood at the lobby door, staring out at the downpour. She hadn't slept again. Her eyes were hollow, her hands cold. Her umbrella was missing. Not forgotten. She remembered packing it when she moved. Bright yellow, foldable, familiar. But it was gone now. In its place, sitting neatly just outside the building entrance, was a red umbrella. She almost didn't notice it. It leaned gently against the wall, its fabric perfectly taut, the curved wooden handle facing toward the door, like it was waiting for her. Something about it felt placed, deliberate. But she was tired, too tired to care. She reached out and picked it up. It was dry. Despite the rain, despite being outside, the umbrella was bone dry. She carried it to the corner bakery. The smell of bread should have comforted her, but it didn't. Nothing did anymore. She ordered coffee and sat by the window, the red umbrella propped beside her. The man at the next table glanced at it once, then back again. "Old design," he said. Yen looked at him. He was middle-aged, kind eyes, the sort of man who made casual observations to strangers. "Excuse me?" "The umbrella," he said, gesturing. "That's the same style they found in that accident a few years ago. You know, the girl who fell." Yen froze. "What girl?" The man paused, sipped his tea. "I think it was this very building. One of the tall ones in this neighborhood. 12 floors. They said a young woman jumped, or maybe fell, from a hallway window." Yen's breath caught. She was holding a red umbrella. They found it beside her, bone dry, like she'd never been in the rain at all. He looked at her again. "Strange thing to carry to your own death, don't you think?" Yen stood suddenly, coffee untouched. She left the bakery without a word. Back home, she placed the red umbrella on the table and sat across from it. It stared back at her, somehow. She reached for it slowly and turned it over. There, stitched in fading thread on the inner lining, was a name. Yen. She dropped it, stumbled backward. Her heart crashed against her ribs. That wasn't possible. She'd never owned a red umbrella, never stitched her name into one. She hadn't known anyone who had. And yet there it was, familiar, intimate, as if it belonged to her, as if it had always belonged to her. Later that day, she returned to the bakery. The man was gone. She asked the staff. No one remembered him. She asked about the story, the girl. None of them had heard anything. She walked to the nearest convenience store and searched online. 12-floor apartment suicide, red umbrella, March 13th. One article. Archived. Old formatting. A blurry image attached. A girl's silhouette, grainy and indistinct, falling mid-frame. Head turned away, hair trailing behind her like smoke. The caption, "Unidentified woman found deceased. Outside residential complex. No next of kin. Red umbrella recovered. 3:13 a.m. She stared at the screen until her hands went numb. She printed the article, folded it, brought it home, placed it on the table, next to the umbrella. It was still dry. That night, the umbrella vanished. She found the front door unlocked again, the umbrella gone. She didn't remember falling asleep, but when she woke, at 3:13 a.m., of course, it was raining again, and her window was open. Rain soaked the sill, and there, resting just inside the curtain, was the umbrella. Closed. Dry. She didn't touch it this time. She didn't move it. She just watched it. And as the minutes passed, she heard it begin to drip. Not rain, not water, but something slower, thicker. A red drop ran from the tip of the umbrella. Then another. It stained the floorboards like ink. And then, a hand knocked once at the window pane. Yen screamed. She backed away, slipped on the wet floor, hit her shoulder against the wall. Outside the window, 12 stories above the ground, a girl stood on the narrow ledge, barefoot, hair soaked, head tilted, paste pressed to the glass. She raised a single hand and pointed down. Yen couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even cry. She crawled to the hallway, into the bedroom, slammed the door. And on the inside of that door, drawn in wet footprints, was the number 1203. She called the police the next day. She said someone was harassing her, entering her apartment, stalking her. They came, looked around, asked a few questions, found nothing, not even the umbrella. She told them about the article. They asked for proof. She showed them the printed copy, but the image was gone, replaced by a blank square and the words, "Page not found." They left politely, and she knew they wouldn't come back. That night, the umbrella appeared again, this time in her shower. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring, until she finally asked, "Who are you?" And in the bathroom mirror, fogged from steam, a single word appeared in slow, trembling strokes. You. By now, Yin had stopped taking the elevator. It wasn't fear, exactly. At least not the kind that came with loud terror. It was something quieter. The unease of watching a machine do something it wasn't supposed to do. A rhythm broken. A step out of time. Because the elevator never stopped on the 12th floor. Not unless you asked it to. And even when you did, sometimes it refused. The first time she noticed, she was returning from the lobby, bags of groceries in both hands. She tapped the button marked 12, like always. The elevator blinked, began its ascent. Floor 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 13. She stared at the numbers as if they had lied to her. The doors opened on the 13th floor, but not before she saw it. Just for a moment, the floor display flickered between 12 and 13. It didn't skip, it glitched, as if the elevator had passed through something, as if it knew. Yin stepped out. The 13th floor was pristine. Plants in the corners, fresh paint, bright lights, a humming fridge somewhere behind closed doors. She walked to the stairwell and began descending. And when she reached the landing marked 12, the world changed. The air was heavy, not hot, not cold, just thick, like walking into a place no one had breathed in for years. The lights were dimmer, buzzing faintly. And the hallway, it was longer than it should have been. Too many doors, too many shadows. And the smell, not rot, not mold, but something older, like burnt incense left in a sealed room for years. She paused, listened. There was no sound. Even her footsteps felt muffled. She turned the corner and the hallway bent with her, which made no sense. The 12th floor was supposed to be linear, one corridor, 4 doors. But this hallway twisted, folded into itself, as if space didn't matter here. She stood in front of 1203. Of course, the door was slightly ajar, not open, not closed, inviting. She stepped forward, heartbeat steady, as if something inside her had given up on fighting. And just before her fingers touched the handle, the hallway behind her changed. She turned. The way she came was gone. No stairwell, no elevator, no wall. Just hallway. More hallway. Identical doors stretching infinitely into shadow. She ran, not screaming, not panicked, just moved instinctually. Door after door, all numbered 1203. Some open, some shut, some bleeding light from underneath, others completely dark. She stopped at one and opened it. Inside, an apartment. Her apartment. Identical. Except the lights were flickering. And on the kitchen table, a red umbrella. Open. Dripping red. She slammed the door. Opened another. Same apartment. This time the orchid was there. Dead. Blackened. A photo frame sat on the nightstand. Her face, smiling beside Nary. Same as before. Yin ran again. Her breath came in sharp bursts. The hallway didn't end. It twisted and swallowed itself. She was in a place that shouldn't exist. A floor that wasn't a floor. A memory loop. Finally, she stopped, leaned against the wall, and whispered to herself, "You're dreaming." And the hallway whispered back, "No, you're remembering." Then the elevator dinged, a soft chime at the end of the corridor. The doors opened. Inside, a mirror. Her reflection was already there waiting, but it wasn't matching her movements. It smiled before she did, tilted its head first, lifted one hand and waved, not at her, but behind her. She turned, and Nary was there, not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as herself, quiet, still, wearing the same blouse from the first day, hair neatly tucked behind one ear. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Yin couldn't speak. "You opened the wrong door." Nary reached out and pressed something in Yin's hand. It was the key, not to her apartment, but to 1203. The metal was ice cold. "Don't lose it again," Nary whispered. The elevator behind them flickered. Yin stepped inside, turned, but Nary was gone. The hallway was gone. Only the mirror remained, and in it her reflection now matched her again. But something lingered in the corners, something watching. The elevator descended and stopped on 11, then again on 10, and again on 9. Each floor flashed once, and behind each door she saw a glimpse of herself, sitting, sleeping, crying, vanishing. A different version each time. And at the very bottom, the lobby was dark, completely dark. And when the doors opened, it wasn't the lobby. It was a funeral hall. Empty chairs. A photo of her on an altar. A red umbrella leaning nearby. The incense smoke curling upward, spelling out 3:13 a.m. She screamed, but no sound came. The elevator jolted, and suddenly she was back, standing in front of her apartment. Door locked, groceries on the floor. The same moment she remembered from days ago. Had it happened? Was it still happening? Her phone buzzed in her hand. A new message. No sender. Just one word. Welcome back.
The key was heavier than before. It sat on Yen's kitchen counter like a relic, slightly rusted at the edges, the teeth worn smooth in places. She hadn't touched it since that night in the hallway. She wasn't even sure how it had followed her home. But there it was, still warm, still waiting. She ignored it for 3 days, tried to. She washed dishes, made tea, worked from her laptop. She even opened the windows to let in air and light and noise. But each night at 3:13 a.m., something shifted. Not outside, inside. Furniture moved slightly. The red umbrella changed angles. The orchid reappeared near the sink. And once, she woke to find her apartment door wide open. No forced entry, no broken latch, just ajar, like someone had returned home. On the 4th day, she picked up the key, her fingers wrapped around the metal like they'd done it before, and maybe they had. She didn't remember walking into the hallway, but there she was, barefoot, holding the key, standing in front of 1203. The mirror across from it was blackened, no reflection. The hallway's silent. She reached forward, breath shallow, and turned the key in the lock. It didn't resist. It didn't even click. It just turned soundlessly. The door opened on its own. Inside was darkness, not total, but thick, like the light was trying to escape but couldn't. She stepped in. The floor creaked beneath her, even though it looked like the same polished wood in her own unit. The layout was identical to 1201. Same walls, same kitchen, same window, same bedroom. But everything was slightly wrong. The air was cold. The light didn't touch corners. And the pictures on the wall, they were of her. Photos she'd never taken. Snapshots of her sitting at her own table, her brushing her hair in front of a mirror, her sleeping. Some were blurred, some were perfectly clear. In each one she looked slightly off, too pale, too still, too silent. The living room smelled of jasmine, familiar now, sickly sweet. She moved toward the bedroom, drawn by something she didn't understand. The bed was made, sheets tucked in with military precision. On the pillow, a small cloth-bound journal. She picked it up and opened the cover. Inside, a name written in neat, slanted handwriting. Nari. She flipped through the pages, entries, hundreds of them, but they weren't dated. They were labeled only with a time. 3:13 a.m., she opened the mirror. 3:13 a.m., she said my name. 3:13 a.m., she left the door unlocked again. 3:13 a.m., she doesn't know she's been here before. 3:13 a.m. I think she's becoming me. Her fingers trembled. At the very last page, the handwriting was different. Hers. 3:13 a.m. I'm not sure which apartment is mine anymore. Yen dropped the journal, turned, and saw herself in the hallway mirror. But she hadn't walked out of the apartment. She hadn't moved. And yet, there she was, in the reflection, standing in front of 1201. She raised her hand. So did the reflection. But it was too late. She realized it too late. The door behind her, 1203, slammed shut. She screamed and yanked at the handle. Locked. No movement. She banged on the door, kicked it. No sound came out. No one heard her. Not even the other version of herself. Not even the reflection. She ran to the window, tried to open it. It was nailed shut. The sky outside was too black. The city was gone, erased, like this room didn't exist in the same world anymore, like it had been pulled aside into something in between. And then she heard it. Footsteps behind her. She turned slowly. Nari stood in the kitchen, smiling gently. You always come back, she said. Her voice was soft, calm, familiar. I never remember, Yen whispered. No, you don't. Nari stepped forward, reached up, and tucked Yen's hair behind one ear. You were the first. Now you're the last. What does that mean? But Nari was already fading, becoming mist, a whisper of herself. You left the door open, so I stayed. The world darkened, the walls stretched, the mirror in the hallway showed only fog now, and when Yen turned to the door again, it was gone, just blank wall where it had once been. In her apartment, or what she thought was her apartment, the door to 1203 stood open once more. A neighbor walked past it without seeing it. The hallway light flickered, and inside, a woman sat quietly on the couch, holding a red umbrella across her lap, waiting.
Yin started visiting the lobby more often, not for company, but for answers. Something about the building felt unfinished. Not the structure, the story. It was like a sentence half spoken, a door half open. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything, room 1203, the mirror, the voices, had roots buried somewhere long ago. Something no one wanted to talk about. And that kind of silence always meant something terrible had happened. She found the janitor near the garbage chute on the ground floor. An older man, wisps of gray hair tucked under a dusty cap. His movements were slow, deliberate, like someone who had been cleaning the same floor for decades. Ian watched him for a moment, then cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said gently. He looked up, surprised. Not many people spoke to him. "I live on the 12th floor. I was wondering if you knew anything about what this building used to be before." His face changed. Subtle, but real. He set down the trash bag, wiped his hands on his shirt, looked around like someone might be listening. Then he nodded once and motioned for her to follow. They sat in the maintenance room, old fan humming, smell of bleach and metal. The janitor didn't speak right away. He just stared at the wall, eyes flickering as if he was watching something that wasn't there. Then finally, in a voice raspy and low, he said, "They built it too fast." Yin said nothing, let the silence work. 12 floors, concrete shell in 6 months. No prayers, no offerings, no ground blessing, no respect. He glanced at her. It was always gonna happen. She leaned forward. What was? He took a deep breath. There was a fire during construction. No alarms yet, no water system, just flame. Room 1203. Yin's chest tightened. They found a girl's body, or parts of it. No ID, no family, no records. She wasn't even supposed to be there. Some say she was squatting. Others say she was locked in by accident. But me? I think she lived here first, before the building, before the floors had numbers. Yin swallowed hard. What happened after? The janitor's eyes darkened. The company sealed it, quietly, rebuilt the room, pretended it never happened. But you can't paint over fire. You can't concrete over spirit. He looked at her directly now. It always starts with one door left open. Then she remembers she was never let out. That night, Yin couldn't sleep. Not because of sounds, because of silence. It felt like the building was holding its breath again, waiting. She paced the apartment. Her eyes landed on the mirror across the hallway. It reflected only blackness now. Not shadow, but soot. She opened her front door. The hallway lights flickered overhead. And across from her, room 1203 looked burned, charred around the edges. The door warped, the number half melted. And from underneath, a thin stream of smoke curled out. Not enough to trigger the alarm, just enough to smell like something old, something unfinished. She took one step forward, then another. The heat hit her before her hand reached the handle. Not burning, but oppressive, like grief held too long inside walls. She touched the door. It swung open on its own. Inside, the apartment was in ruins. Ash coated everything. Walls scorched, furniture blackened and collapsed. And at the center of it all, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was a girl. Back turned, hair long and still wet, skin cracked like porcelain. She turned slowly. Yin didn't scream, didn't run. She just looked. And the girl looked back, their faces the same. In her lap, the girl held a photo. Yin knew what it was before she saw it. The rooftop, the umbrella, the mirror, the smile. Her and Nari together. The girl whispered, "You forgot." Yin shook her head. "I never knew." The girl blinked. "You did. You chose to forget. You left me in the fire. You walked away." The room trembled. The walls burned again, but silently, as if the memory was reawakening. Flames curled around the ceiling. Ash fell like snow. Yin reached out her hand. The girl took it. And for a moment, just a moment, the fire stopped. The mirror cleared in the hallway, and they were both there. Two girls, side by side, staring out, waiting for someone to knock. When Yin woke, she was in her bed. The air smelled of burnt wood. Her hands were covered in soot, and under her pillow, the journal. But now every page had changed, each one filled with her own handwriting, and the last line read, "The fire was not the end, it was the beginning." Yen bought a camera, not to capture beauty, to catch proof. She placed it by the front door, angled toward the hallway. Every night she made sure it was recording. Every morning she reviewed the footage. Nothing. Day after day, night after night, until one morning there was something. It began like the others, Timestamp 3:12:48 a.m. The hallway was empty, light steady, silence. Then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the light above room 1203 flickered. A shape stepped into frame. Barefoot, thin, long hair trailing behind her like silk in water. She walked slowly toward Yen's door and stopped. For a moment she stood there, unmoving, then raised her hand. Tap. Once, twice, 3 times. Soft, deliberate. Then she turned to the mirror, faced it, and smiled. Not at her reflection, at the camera. Yen froze the frame, zoomed in, and what she saw made her throat close. The girl was her. Her face, her body, but wrong. Too pale, too empty behind the eyes, too calm, like someone who had done this 100 times. The next night, she moved the camera inside her apartment, placed it on a shelf pointed toward her bed. She didn't sleep, just lay still with the lights off, pretending. The clock on her phone ticked. 3:12 a.m., 3:12:30, 3:12:59. She closed her eyes, held her breath. 3:13 a.m. Click. Her bedroom door opened. She sat up with a gasp, but no one was there. She grabbed her phone, turned on the screen. Nothing. But when she reviewed the footage the next morning, she watched herself sleep, then rise, step out of bed, walk calmly toward the hallway, open the front door, and disappear. No emotion, no hesitation, just left. She never remembered doing it, but every night the recording said the same thing. 3:13 a.m. She walked out, into the hallway, into the mirror, into 1203. She called her mother that evening, wanted to hear a familiar voice, something to anchor her. The phone rang twice before connecting. "Meh," she whispered. There was silence on the other end. Then a voice, soft, gentle, but not her mother's. "She's not here anymore." Yen pulled the phone from her ear, looked at the screen. No number, no record of the call. She checked her reflection in the bathroom, studied her own eyes, her hands, her breathing. Something felt different, delayed, as if her body remembered something she didn't, as if it wasn't entirely hers anymore. That night she left all the lights on, didn't sleep, didn't blink, just watched the clock. 3:12 a.m., 3:12:45, 3:12:59. She stood, walked to the mirror in the hallway, and this time watched it closely. 3:13 a.m. She didn't see her reflection. She saw herself outside the mirror, knocking on her own door. A loop, a repetition, not a haunting, a pattern. The next morning she found a note on her kitchen table, her handwriting, but she hadn't written it. "I went to 1203, don't follow." But of course she would. She always did. She always had. Later that day she received a call, unknown number. She answered. The voice whispered, "You left the door open again." She dropped the phone, ran to her door, locked it, bolted it, chained it. But behind her, she heard it unlock. The camera footage from that night showed something new. 3:13 a.m. She rose again, but this time, before leaving, she looked directly at the lens, tilted her head, smiled, and whispered something. Yen leaned closer,
turned up the volume. Her voice was clear. "It's your turn now." She checked the mirror. Only fog. No reflection. No hallway. Just her. Or what was left of her. Some version. Some echo. Wearing her skin like a memory. And behind her, room 1203. Open again.
Yen stopped trying to leave the building. Not because she was trapped, but because the city outside no longer felt real. When she walked past the lobby, the doors reflected a different version of the world. Duller, slower, like it had forgotten how to move without her. No matter where she went, grocery store, park bench, elevator ride, her mind remained tethered to one place, room 1203. It pulled at her like gravity. That week, she made a decision. She went back to the leasing office, back to the receptionist with the vacant smile and flickering eyes. "I want to see the logs," she said, her voice calm. "Tenant entries, surveillance, move-ins, move-outs." The woman tilted her head as if struggling to compute. "We don't keep physical logs, miss." "I know there are cameras. You said so when I signed." Silence. Then, a slow nod. "We can show you," the woman said, "but only from your floor." The screen showed a split view of the 12th floor hallway. Time-stamped windows of identical footage. Gray tile, sterile walls, overhead lighting that always seemed too white. "Can you rewind?" Yen asked. The woman complied. Back through days, weeks, months. Footage blurred as they moved backward, a river of time unraveling. Then, a figure, pausing, walking, at 3:13 a.m. Not one figure, many, all different. Different faces, different tenants, but all of them stopping in front of room 1203, knocking, entering, disappearing. Yen leaned in. "Who are they?" The woman said nothing, but her fingers hovered over the mouse and clicked open a second folder. Inside, archived incident reports, handwritten, scanned, old, some decades old. Tenant in 1201 reported voices through vent again. New occupant on 12th floor claims neighbor in 1203 watches from the mirror. Evacuation following mirror shattering during blackout. Tenant screamed, then vanished. And one dated March 14, 2003. Y. Tran filed maintenance request for lights flickering near 1203. Note, no record of Y. Tran found in system. Apartment appears unassigned. Camera logs erased. Yen stared. Who was she? The woman looked at her, expressionless. "You were," she said. Yen left the office in a daze. The world tilted. The floor beneath her felt wrong, like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the cracks begin. That night, she opened her closet. Inside was a shoebox she didn't remember owning. Inside that, a stack of photos, all of her, or someone wearing her face, at different ages, standing in front of room 1203, alone, smiling, waiting. In one of the photos, her eyes were closed. In another, she was holding a red umbrella. And in the last, she was gone. Just the hallway, just the mirror, just the timestamp, 3:13 a.m. She checked the camera footage again, played it backward. In one frame, she watched herself enter room 1203. In the next, she didn't come back, but something else did. The reflection, the echo. It wore her clothes. It spoke with her voice. but it wasn't her. Yen ran to the hallway. Room 1203 stood open, for the first time, wide open. Not inviting, welcoming. She stepped inside. No ash, no burn marks, no furniture, just mirrors. Every wall, reflecting her from every direction. Thousands of her, all slightly different. Some weeping, some laughing, some staring blankly forward. She turned, and behind her, the door had vanished. At the center of the room, a single figure, sitting on the floor, hair long, back straight. The girl from the fire, Nari. She turned around, but now she looked just like Yen. Same eyes, same face, same fear. "Why me?" Yen whispered, and the girl replied, "You were never supposed to leave." The mirrors shifted, reflections rippled, now showing the past, a girl alone in a dark hallway, knocking on a door that didn't exist, leaving behind a version of herself each time. One for each knock, one for each loop, one for each tenant who forgot they had already come before. Yen sank to her knees. "I remember now," she said. Nari nodded. "You always do." Then handed her the key, not to unlock the door, to keep it closed forever. But it was too late. The door was already gone, and behind the mirror, another girl stood, waiting. Yin stopped answering her name, not because she was hiding, but because she wasn't sure it belonged to her anymore. When the phone rang, she let it. When neighbors passed, none did. When her phone vibrated, she didn't look. Every night she dreamt of herself, but not from her perspective. She saw herself from behind the mirror, from the stairwell corner, from the ceiling above the bed, always watching, always knowing what she was about to do, because she had done it before. The apartment had changed again. The lights flickered in new patterns. The walls creaked like they remembered too much. She came home one afternoon and found the furniture rearranged, not just shifted, but reset, the way it was the day she moved in. The same angle of the couch, the same crooked teacup on the counter, the same welcome note in the drawer, though she had burned that weeks ago. Time was folding, space was replaying, and she was no longer sure who had arrived first, her or her shadow. One morning, she woke up to find her closet full. Clothes she didn't recognize, a long blue dress with delicate lace at the collar, a cardigan she'd never wear, all perfectly folded, pressed with care. There was even a note tucked in one pocket. She unfolded it slowly. It read, "You'll need these soon. Y. Tran." Her name, in someone else's handwriting. Later that day, she caught a glimpse of herself in the elevator mirror, but something was wrong. Her reflection blinked out of sync, smiled too soon, stepped forward when she hadn't moved. She pressed the emergency stop and backed away, heart racing. The elevator continued downward. No pause, no jolt. It didn't stop until the basement, but when the doors opened, there was no basement, only a long hallway, dusty, silent, and at the far end, room 1203. She shut her eyes, pressed the button for her floor. The elevator did not respond, but the door closed, and when it opened again, she was in her apartment, lights off, candles burning, and a girl sitting at the table facing away. Yin didn't speak. The girl didn't move, but as she stepped forward, she noticed the girl had her hair, her posture, her voice, when she finally said, "You left me in there." Yin ran, down the hallway, up the stairs, through her own door. She locked it behind her, then screamed as she saw the girl sitting calmly on her couch as if she'd never moved. Everywhere she went, she followed herself. There were notes now, all in her own handwriting, pasted to walls, inside the fridge, under her pillow. "You said yes last time. Don't forget to knock back. The fire doesn't kill you, it keeps you." She tore them down, burned them, but they returned, more each day. She checked the hallway camera again. At 3:13 a.m., she watched herself walk to 12:03, knock, enter. But when she fast-forwarded to 3:14, another version of herself came back, smiling, settling in, as if nothing had changed. But something had. The girl who returned wasn't afraid. She looked comfortable, at home. That evening she stood at the mirror and whispered, "Who are you?" The reflection whispered back, "I'm who you become when you stay too long." She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Her skin grew pale, her eyes shadowed, but she couldn't leave, because she wasn't sure she ever had. She visited the building records again, only to find her name listed 3 times. 3 different move-in dates, each under a variation of her handwriting, each listing the same emergency contact, Nari, sister. But Yin didn't have a sister, or at least, she didn't think she did. The janitor passed her in the stairwell one evening, stopped, looked at her, but didn't speak. Then, quietly he said, "You're the quiet one this time," then walked away. That night she opened every cabinet, every drawer, and found things that didn't belong. A toothbrush already in the holder, a teacup stained with lipstick she didn't wear, a voicemail on her phone in a voice that sounded like hers, older, quieter. "You'll forget again. We always do." And then one night she opened her eyes and saw herself standing at the foot of the bed. Not a ghost, not a shadow, herself, smiling gently, holding a candle. "You're almost ready." For what? For staying. Yin didn't move, didn't speak. She simply sat up, reached forward, and touched her own hand. It was warm, alive, and then she was gone, replaced by nothing but her own reflection in the bedroom mirror, staring back, patiently. The hallway no longer responded to her footsteps. Yen floated through it now, silent, weightless, unseen. Room 1203 was no longer just a door. It was a place inside her, a memory she walked through, even when standing still. The building no longer asked who she was. It already knew. She had stopped checking the mirror days ago, or maybe it had been weeks. Time was difficult now, pliable, soft around the edges. Some mornings she woke in 1201. Other times she woke in 1203. Sometimes she woke watching herself sleep. None of it frightened her anymore, because none of it was foreign. She began recognizing the loops, the knock at 3:13 a.m., the red umbrella outside the door, the orchid on the sill that never died, the reflection that smiled a moment too soon. She remembered now, not just one life, but many, versions of herself that had come before, some who resisted, some who forgot, and some who had simply surrendered. Yen had become all of them, and something else. She stood in the hallway one night, long after midnight. The mirror reflected nothing but endless depth. She turned toward room 1203 and saw her hand reach for the knob before she meant to move. But it didn't matter. She belonged there now. Inside, the room was clean. No scorch marks, no soot, just calm, soft light, still air, like a place that had waited a long time for someone to return. And at the center, a small table, a candle burning, and a second key, not to enter, but to stay. She sat, took the key, placed it in her pocket, and waited. The next morning, the building welcomed a new tenant, young, hopeful, moving alone. Apartment 1201. He wheeled his suitcase down the hallway, glancing at the closed doors. When he passed room 1203, he paused. There was a faint scent in the air, jasmine, and something like smoke, but only for a moment. He shook it off, continued to his door. The key jammed slightly before turning, then clicked open. He stepped inside. Later that night, he unpacked quietly, tried to ignore how silent the floor was, how none of the other doors seemed to open. At one point, just past 3 a.m., he stepped out into the hallway to throw away a wrapper. The corridor was empty, still, the air unmoving. But he heard something, a knock. Not at his door, at the mirror. He looked and saw a girl standing in front of room 1203, hair long, barefoot, not moving, just there. Her eyes dark, her face familiar, though he couldn't place it. Then she raised her hand, knocked gently on the mirror once, twice, 3 times. He blinked. The hallway was empty, just his reflection staring back. He laughed nervously, muttered to himself, "Late-night jitters." But when he turned to go back inside, there on his doormat was a note, folded, unmarked. He opened it. It read, "Don't answer her. Not yet." And just before the hallway light blinked off, room 1203's door creaked, open, an inch, maybe less, but enough. Inside, Yen waited, not as a shadow, not as a scream, but as presence, steady, patient, watching, just like the one before her, and the one before that, because ghosts, she realized, are not made in death. They are made in repetition, in loops left unanswered, in doors opened one too many times. Room 1203 didn't need to exist in the blueprints. It existed in her. And now, it would exist in someone else. At exactly 3:13 a.m., Yen smiled. Her hand reached for the mirror and gently knocked.